A Constant Love, a Pride and Prejudice continuation. Written by Sophie Turner. Narrated by Verona Westbrook. Part 1. The wedding was generally deemed a success among their acquaintance. Those who were inclined to be happy for the couples thought Jane and Elizabeth looked quite elegant. Mrs. Bennet's histrionics were kept to a minimum, and the vicar spoke well. Those few who were not inclined to be happy for the couples found little audience for their criticisms, and were as such forced into silence. For Elizabeth, the calm scene within the church belied the hectic early morning preparations at Longbourn, where the cacophony of her mother and younger sisters, as they finished packing Jane and Elizabeth's trunks and helped them dress, had done away with any sentiment Elizabeth might have had in leaving her childhood home. The only time she had come near tears was when her father had called her into his library the evening before and said, "Well now, Lizzie, tomorrow you will be Mrs. Darcy. I shall miss you greatly." She had expected him to finish his statement with some witticism about how there would be no sense in the house now, but he could not. There were tears in his own eyes. The ceremony itself had held a surreal quality for her. It seemed unimaginable that all of those people were there. Family and friends, that the events so long hoped and waited for were finally happening. Elizabeth had smiled a small, private smile as she reached the altar on her father's arm, that here he was, handing her away to the man she'd once said was the last man in the world she would marry. Her thoughts were much occupied by the events that had led her and Darcy there, and she only half attended the vicar as he spoke, but managed her lines creditably. She had felt a thrill of anticipation when it came time for the gentlemen to kiss their new wives, but was disappointed when Mr. Darcy placed only a proper little chaste kiss on her lips. With so much anticipation, she had looked forward to her first kiss, and it had not been so special as she'd always imagined it would be. But Elizabeth was not inclined to dwell on relatively small disappointments on such a day, and she had nearly forgotten it by the time the couples made a slow procession past their well-wishers to the waiting carriages. Mr. Darcy handed her in and then sat down beside her, and Elizabeth felt the change in her status keenly now. To be allowed to be alone with him, nay, to have every right to be alone with him, gave her quite a rush of delight. "I do apologize, Mrs. Darcy," he said, as the carriage pulled away to follow the now Bingleys. "You know I must be most careful of observing decorum in front of such an audience, when what I truly wanted to do was this." He leaned over and cupped her chin and kissed her deeply. And at that moment, everything became perfect. She was thrilled by the sensation. She felt she understood him even better now, that there would be a public Mr. Darcy and a private Mr. Darcy, and as much as she had finally come to understand the former, the latter she would now discover.